The great hall of the alien palace was quiet, but it was never empty. Tall pillars of black stone rose high into the shadows, and the walls glimmered with jewels taken from 100 conquered worlds. At the center, on a throne made of crystal and gold, sat the alien mistress. Her eyes were cold, sharp like blades of glass. She had ruled for many years, and no one dared to question her. Her power came not only from her armies, but from her clever mind. She trusted no one, not her servants, not her generals, and not even her own family. But today she wanted to test one person above all others. Her human bodyguard. He stood near the throne, silent and still. His armor was plain, nothing like the shining plates of her alien soldiers. His weapon was an old blade, not the glowing spears or laser guns used by the palace guards. Yet the mistress kept him close, closer than anyone else. Humans were rare in her empire, and most were slaves. This one was different. He was not weak. He was not greedy. Or at least that was what he made her believe. She wanted to know the truth. The mistress leaned forward, her long fingers tapping the armrest of her throne. A sly smile touched her lips. "Human," she said, her voice echoing across the hall. "Come closer." He obeyed without a word, stepping until he stood at the foot of her throne. His eyes never looked down, but neither did they challenge her. They were steady, calm, like a soldier who had seen too much war. The mistress clapped her hands once. The great doors at the side of the hall opened, and 2 alien servants entered. They struggled under the weight of a large chest made of dark metal, carved with strange glowing runes. The chest was placed in front of the throne, and with a hiss of air it unlocked itself. Inside, mountains of treasure shone brightly. Coins of silver, bars of gold, jewels that burned like fire, and crystals that hummed with hidden energy. The light filled the hall, bouncing off the walls until everything glowed. The mistress watched her bodyguard carefully. His face was calm, but she looked for the smallest crack, greed in his eyes, hunger in his breath, a twitch of the hand. She believed all humans loved wealth more than duty. This was her test. "Look at it," she said softly, almost like a whisper. "This treasure could be yours. More than your kind has ever dreamed of. Take it, touch it, feel its power." For a moment, silence hung heavy between them. The human lowered his gaze, not to the mistress, but to the chest. The jewels sparkled, tempting, alive. Any other man would have fallen to his knees, grabbing handfuls of wealth like a starving beast, but he did not move. Instead, he asked calmly, "Do you want me to guard it, mistress?" The question caught her off guard. She leaned back in her throne, her smile fading for a heartbeat. She had expected him to reach, to take, to fail, but he had turned her trick into an order. "Yes," she said quickly, covering her surprise. "Guard it alone. Tonight it will stay here in this hall, and you, my human, will watch over it until the morning sun rises." He bowed slightly. "As you command." The mistress narrowed her eyes. "But remember, no guards will be with you. No eyes but mine. If you take even a single coin, I will know." He said nothing. He only stepped back, placing himself between the chest and the wide doors of the hall. His blade rested in his hand, sharp and steady. The servants left. The other guards left. Even the light of the hall grew dim, leaving only the faint glow of the treasure. The mistress sat high upon her throne, hidden in the shadows, her eyes fixed on him. Hours passed. The human did not move. He stood like a statue, his back straight, his eyes sweeping across the hall, not at the gold. His hand rested on the hilt of his blade, ready for enemies, not for riches. The mistress grew restless. She wanted him to break. She wanted him to show weakness. But he did not. Then in the stillness of the night he spoke. His voice was low but clear, and it carried through the hall. "I know you are watching, mistress." Her heart froze for a moment. From the shadows of her throne, her eyes widened. He had known all along. He had known her test. The mistress leaned forward, her long claws gripping the armrest. For the first time in many years, she felt something she had not felt before. Not anger, not pride, but doubt. And she whispered to herself, "What kind of human are you?" The hall was silent except for the faint hum of the treasure chest. Jewels glowed faintly, casting strange colors on the black stone floor. The alien mistress sat hidden in the shadows of her throne, her sharp eyes locked on her human bodyguard. He had spoken as if he knew her secret, as if he could feel her watching. It unsettled her, but it also stirred her curiosity even more. She leaned her chin on her hand and whispered to herself, Let us see how long you can resist. The human stood alone in the vast hall, his figure small against the towering pillars and walls of gold. He did not kneel to the treasure. He did not even glance at it for long. Instead, his eyes scanned the dark corners of the room, the high windows, the tall doors. He behaved not like a thief, but like a sentinel ready for battle. Hours slipped away. The mistress shifted impatiently. Most men would have broken by now. They would have stolen one coin, one jewel, anything to satisfy their greed. She had tested hundreds before, and none had resisted for so long. But this human was different. His calmness was almost unnatural. Finally, she whispered an order. Two servants appeared silently from the shadows of the side door. Their task was simple: sneak forward and tempt him. Each servant carried a small pouch of gems, their colors shifting like fire. The servants crept closer, footsteps soft as wind. But before they could even reach the treasure, the human's voice cut through the silence. Stop. The servants froze. His blade had already left its sheath, and the cold metal reflected the glow of the treasure chest. He did not shout, nor did he threaten. His voice was even, but it carried the weight of command. The mistress ordered me to guard this hall, he said slowly, his eyes fixed on them. Leave, now. The servants trembled. They looked toward the shadows where their mistress sat, waiting for a sign. But she gave none. She wanted to see what the human would do. When the servants did not move, the human took a step forward, his blade rising. If you disobey, you will not walk out alive. The servants fled at once, their pouches of gems spilling across the floor. The human did not bend to pick them up. Instead, he stood tall once more, his back turned to the glittering stones, his eyes sweeping the hall again. The alien mistress felt a strange chill on her skin. He had not even blinked at the gems. She had wanted to laugh at his foolish pride, but deep inside, she felt something else. Unease. Hours later, the hall grew colder. The torches burned low and shadows stretched like claws across the floor. The mistress sat still, her eyes unblinking, her thoughts restless. She wondered if the human was clever enough to be playing a trick. Perhaps he wanted her trust so that one day he could take everything. Perhaps his calmness was only a mask. At that moment, the human broke the silence again. His voice was steady, directed not at the treasure, not at the servants, but at the shadows themselves. You think I don't know? He said quietly, though his words carried across the entire hall. You test me because you do not trust me. That is wise. But understand this, mistress. My loyalty is not something you can buy with gold or gems. The mistress stiffened in her throne. Her claws gripped the armrests tighter. The human's eyes moved across the shadows as if he could see her even though she was hidden. I have seen what treasure does to men. It burns them from the inside. It makes them weak. I will not be weak again. The last words hit her like a blade. Again. There was a story in that word, a hidden past. She leaned forward, her cold eyes narrowing. This human carried scars deeper than flesh. The chest of treasure continued to glow, but its light seemed smaller now, less powerful compared to the man standing guard over it. The mistress, for the first time in many years, felt unsure. Was he truly loyal? Or was this just a game he played, waiting for the perfect moment to strike? As the night grew darker, she realized something else. She was no longer testing him. He was testing her patience, her beliefs, her control. By dawn, the human still had not moved from his post. He stood strong, his blade in hand, his eyes sharp. The treasure lay untouched, the jewels scattered on the floor where the servants had dropped them. The mistress rose slowly from her throne, her long cloak trailing behind her as she stepped into the dim light. Her eyes locked on the human, and for the first time she spoke to him not as a ruler giving orders, but as a woman facing something she did not understand. You surprise me, human, she said softly. Perhaps you are not what I thought. The human bowed slightly, his voice calm. I told you, mistress. I protect, nothing more. But his eyes held a weight she could not read, and in that moment, she felt something she had never felt before. Doubt. The sun rose high above the alien palace, casting light across towers of black stone and golden domes. The great hall was once again filled with voices, music, and movement. The alien mistress had ordered a feast. Servants rushed in and out carrying trays of strange fruits, glowing drinks, and steaming meat from beasts hunted on distant worlds. The air was thick with the scent of spice and wine, and laughter echoed through the chamber. The human bodyguard stood near the throne as always, silent, his blade at his side. He looked out of place among the glittering nobles and soldiers. They wore fine robes, shining armor, and rings that sparkled like stars. He wore only simple armor, scarred from battle, and his old sword. Many of the nobles sneered at him, whispering behind jeweled hands. They could not understand why their mistress kept such a plain, rough human so close to her throne. But the mistress was watching him more than she was watching her guests. The memory of the long night still burned in her mind. The treasure had remained untouched even when left at his feet. She had expected betrayal. Instead, she had found unshakable loyalty, or perhaps something even more dangerous, control. He was not like other men, and that unsettled her. She raised her jeweled hand and the music softened. "Tonight," she declared, her voice echoing, "we celebrate our strength, our victories, and our future. Eat, drink, and remember that all of this belongs to me." The hall roared with cheers. Goblets lifted, plates clattered, music rose again. But the mistress was not finished. She lifted a crystal cup filled with a dark, glowing wine. Her sharp eyes slid to her human bodyguard. "Drink with me," she said. The human's gaze flicked to the goblet. He stepped forward, and a servant quickly poured the same wine into a plain cup for him. The mistress's smile was thin, sharp like a knife. This wine was not ordinary. It was brewed from a plant that could twist the mind, weaken the will, and strip a person's secrets bare. Many rulers had used it to test the loyalty of their servants. She lifted her cup and drank slowly, her eyes never leaving him. He raised his cup, drank, and set it down without a word. His expression did not change. His hand did not shake. The mistress leaned forward. "Tell me, human, do you not feel its power?" He wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. His voice was calm, steady as stone. "I feel it, but I do not bow to it." Her claws dug lightly into the armrest of her throne. She wanted to push him further, break his mask, see his weakness. But before she could speak again, the sound of metal rang out from the far side of the hall. A scream tore through the music. Masked figures burst from the shadows, blades drawn, eyes burning with hate. Assassins. The nobles shouted in panic, spilling wine and jewels as they stumbled back. Servants dropped trays and fled. Guards rushed forward, but the assassins moved fast, cutting them down before they could form a line. The alien mistress rose from her throne, her cloak swirling. Her soldiers shouted her name, but they were too far. The assassins were already closing in, but the human was faster. His blade flashed as he moved in front of her, striking down the first assassin with a single brutal swing. Blood sprayed across the marble floor, and his eyes burned with fire. The second attacker lunged, but the human kicked the table forward, knocking plates and food into the assassin's chest. In the blink of an eye, his sword pierced through the man's mask. The hall became chaos. Nobles ran screaming. Guards clashed with masked killers, and fire spilled from overturned torches. But the mistress's eyes never left her bodyguard. He fought not for treasure, not for glory, but for her. Every movement of his blade was precise, controlled, deadly. He placed himself between her and every strike. One assassin broke past him, leaping toward the mistress with twin daggers. She gasped, but before the blades could touch her, the human's hand shot out. He grabbed the assassin's wrist, twisted it until the bone snapped, and hurled the attacker to the floor. His sword finished the job in a flash. The mistress felt her heart racing. She was not afraid of the assassins. She had faced death many times. What shook her was the man standing in front of her throne, blood on his armor, his face calm and cold as stone. He had not hesitated. He had not thought of his own life. He had only moved to protect hers. By the time the last assassin fell, the hall was in ruins. Smoke rose from broken torches. The floor was littered with overturned tables, broken goblets, and the bodies of the dead. Guards rushed to secure the doors. Nobles whispered in fear, and servants wept. But the human only wiped his blade clean and stood silently at her side, as if nothing had happened. The alien mistress sank slowly back onto her throne. Her hands trembled slightly as she lifted her cup again, though she did not drink. Her eyes never left him. For the first time, she did not see him as a simple guard or even as a test subject. She saw him as something else, something she could not yet name. And as the hall settled into uneasy silence, she whispered to herself, "Why do you protect me so fiercely, human? What are you hiding?" But he did not answer. His eyes stayed on the shadows, ready for another attack, and in that moment she realized her test was no longer hers alone. He was testing her too. The hall smelled of smoke and blood. Servants cleaned the floor where bodies had fallen, while guards dragged away the dead assassins. The nobles whispered in corners, shaken by the attack. But the alien mistress sat on her throne in silence, her eyes fixed on the man who had saved her life. The human bodyguard stood before her, his blade still resting in his hand. He was calm, steady, as if the violence had meant nothing to him. His armor was stained with blood, his face marked with sweat, but his gaze was sharp, watching every shadow, every corner of the hall. Finally, the mistress spoke. Her voice was quiet, almost thoughtful. "You should be dead. They came with blades, poison, fire. Yet you fought them all." The human wiped his sword on a fallen cloak and sheathed it. "I did my duty," her eyes narrowed. "Why, you could have left me. You could have taken the treasure, fled in the chaos. Yet you stayed." He turned toward her then, his expression unreadable. "Because I was ordered to guard you." The words were simple, but they carried a weight she could not ignore. She leaned forward on her throne, her jeweled hand tapping against the armrest. "No, that is not enough. I have seen men abandon their oaths for far less. You are not like them. You are not like anyone." The human was silent for a moment. Then slowly he spoke. "I was not always this way." The mistress tilted her head, her sharp eyes glinting. "Then tell me, what changed you?" The hall grew quiet, as if the very air waited for his answer. The nobles leaned closer, though none dared to speak. The human's eyes grew distant, his voice low and steady. "Long ago I had a family, a wife, a child. We lived on a world far from here. It was not rich, not powerful, but it was ours. I was a soldier then, just as I am now. I thought I fought for honor. But in truth, I fought for reward. I believed gold could keep us safe. I believed wealth could buy peace." His hand tightened on the hilt of his blade, his voice growing sharper. "One day raiders came. They offered me riches if I betrayed my duty, if I left my post unguarded. And I agreed. I thought I could take the gold, protect my family, and no one would suffer." He paused. The hall was silent. The alien mistress's eyes never left his face. "When I returned home," he continued, his voice quieter now, "I found only ash. The raiders had lied. My family was gone. My home was gone. I had chosen treasure over duty, and it destroyed everything I loved." The mistress felt a strange chill spread through her chest. The human's face was calm, but his words carried a pain deeper than any wound. "From that day," he said, his eyes hard as stone, "I swore I would never choose gold again. I would never betray my duty, no matter the cost. Loyalty is all I have left." The mistress leaned back slowly, her jeweled fingers curling around the armrest of her throne. For years, she had believed all men could be bought. She had believed that treasure was stronger than honor. But this human, this scarred, broken human, stood before her as proof that she had been wrong. Yet doubt still lingered in her heart. Was he telling the truth? Or was this story another mask, a tale designed to earn her trust? She studied him carefully, but his face revealed nothing. "You expect me to believe this?" she asked finally, her voice sharp. "That you serve me not for treasure, not for power, but because of some vow you made long ago?" The human met her gaze without fear. "Believe what you will. My actions will prove more than my words." The mistress felt her claws tighten. She wanted to strike him, to punish him for daring to speak so boldly, but instead she found herself staring into his eyes. They were steady, unshaken, filled not with greed or fear, but with something else, a fire she could not extinguish. She leaned back, her cloak falling around her shoulders. "Perhaps you are telling the truth. Or perhaps you are the most dangerous liar I have ever met. Either way." Her lips curved into a thin smile. "I will find out." The hall was silent again. The nobles whispered nervously, but none dared to interrupt. The human only bowed his head slightly and returned to his post, his hand resting on the hilt of his blade. The mistress's heart was unsettled. For the first time in her long rule, she could not see through someone. She did not know if she should fear him, trust him, or destroy him. And as the night fell once more, she whispered to herself, "Human, your past may bind you, but will it bind me as well?" The human did not answer. His eyes remained fixed on the shadows, ready for enemies that might come again. But in her heart, the mistress felt something new, a dangerous curiosity. The palace was quiet after the feast, but the alien mistress's mind was not. She could not forget the human's words. his story of betrayal and loss. She replayed them again and again in her thoughts, searching for weakness, searching for a lie. But she found none. His eyes had carried a fire she had never seen before. A fire no gold could buy, no wine could weaken, and that made him dangerous. She sat in her private chamber, the walls lined with maps of star systems and banners of conquered worlds. In the center stood a small pedestal carved from black stone. Resting upon it was a single object, her command seal, a symbol of her power. Whoever held it could give orders to her armies, her fleets, even her governors. It was more than treasure. It was power. The mistress tapped her long fingers against the armrest of her chair. Wealth could not tempt him, she thought. Wine could not break him. Perhaps power will. She summoned him. The human entered the chamber silently, bowing his head only slightly. His armor was polished, though still scarred from battles. His old blade hung at his side. His eyes, as always, were calm and sharp. "You called for me, mistress?" he asked. The mistress rose from her chair and walked toward the pedestal. Her cloak dragged along the floor like the wings of a dark bird. She lifted the command seal in her clawed hand. It glowed faintly, etched with runes that pulsed like a heartbeat. She turned to him, her lips curving into a cold smile. "This," she said, "is worth more than treasure. With this you could command my soldiers, my fleets, my empire itself. Men would kneel before you. Worlds would obey you." She held it out toward him. "Take it." The human's brow furrowed slightly, but he did not move. "Why?" The mistress tilted her head. "Because I order it. Take it, human. Hold the weight of my empire in your hand. See what it feels like to command." Slowly he stepped forward. His boots echoed against the stone floor. He reached out and took the seal. It was heavier than it looked, warm against his palm. For a long moment he stared at it, silent. The mistress watched eagerly, her heart quickening. This was the true test. No man could resist power. No soldier could hold such authority in his hand without using it. But the human only turned the seal over once, then closed his fingers around it. His gaze lifted to hers, steady, unshaken. "This is not mine," he said simply, and he placed the seal back into her hand. The mistress froze. Her claws curled around the seal as if to protect it. She searched his face for trickery, for hidden greed, for even a flicker of desire, but there was nothing. His expression was calm, firm, certain. "You would refuse this?" she asked, her voice sharp with disbelief. "You would give up power that most men would kill for?" He nodded once. "I am not most men." The mistress's lips parted, then closed again. For the first time she had no words. The human stepped back, his hand returning to the hilt of his blade. "I am a guard, mistress. I protect. I do not rule." Her chest tightened. Anger burned inside her, not at him but at herself. For years she had believed everyone had a price. Everyone wanted something: gold, wine, power. But this man, this human, wanted none of it. He could not be bought. He could not be bent, and that terrified her. She turned away quickly, hiding the tremor in her hands as she set the seal back upon its pedestal. "You are a fool," she said, her voice sharp. "Power is everything. Without it you are nothing." But even as she spoke, her words felt empty. The human's reply was quiet, but it cut deeper than any blade. "If power is everything, why do you look so alone on your throne?" The mistress's breath caught. Her claws dug into her palm. She wanted to strike him, to silence him, but instead she stood frozen. His words had pierced through the armor she wore around her heart, leaving her exposed. He bowed his head slightly, then turned to leave. "As long as I draw breath, I will guard you. Not for gold, not for power, but because I swore it. That is enough." The chamber door closed behind him, leaving her in silence. The mistress stood still, the command seal heavy in her hand. For the first time in her long reign, she did not feel the weight of power. She felt the weight of doubt. Her test had failed again. Or perhaps, she thought, it was never his test at all. Perhaps it was hers. And as the night grew dark outside the palace windows, the alien mistress whispered to herself, "What are you, human? What are you turning me into?" The palace was never truly quiet. Yet for the alien mistress, the nights had become restless. She lay on her jeweled bed, staring at the ceiling of black stone, unable to sleep. The command seal still burned in her mind. The human had held it in his hand. Power greater than most could imagine, and he had simply given it back. No hesitation. No greed. She rolled over and hissed softly in frustration. "Why? Why does he not want what all others crave? Her claws tapped the side of the bed. She was the mistress of countless worlds. She had broken kings, enslaved empires, and tested thousands. Every one of them had shown weakness, but not him. The human strength was something she could not explain, and it disturbed her. That night, instead of sleeping, she left her chamber. Her cloak whispered against the floor as she moved through the dark halls of the palace. Guards bowed low as she passed, but she gave them no glance. Her steps carried her toward the outer courtyard, where the stars burned bright against the black sky. There she found him. The human stood alone, as always, his sword resting across his knees. He sat on the cold stone steps, sharpening the blade with slow, steady movements. His eyes were alert, scanning the shadows even as he worked. He looked like a statue carved from iron, unyielding and silent. The mistress watched from the shadows, hidden behind a pillar. She should have been in her chamber, resting. Yet something had pulled her here. She told herself it was caution, that she needed to be sure her guard was not plotting against her. But deep inside, she knew the truth. She wanted to understand him. The minutes stretched. He finished sharpening his blade, then rose to his feet. Instead of sleeping, he began to patrol the courtyard, his steps slow, deliberate, his eyes sharp. Even when no threat was near, he did not relax. The mistress tilted her head. He guards even when no one watches him, even when he thinks he is alone. For the first time in years, she felt something strange. Trust. The next night, she returned again. She told herself it was only curiosity. Yet once more she found him awake, sharpening his blade, walking the grounds, standing guard beneath the stars. He never rested deeply. He never left his post. And each night as she watched him, the mistress felt the stone walls around her heart begin to crack. By day, she continued her rule as always. She sat on her throne, gave orders to generals, and judged the guilty. But she found her eyes drifting to the side where he always stood, silent and watchful. His presence was steady, like an anchor in a storm. She began to notice the small things. The way his hand tightened on his blade when strangers came too close. The way he positioned himself between her and every open space. The way his eyes never rested on treasure or luxury, but always on the shadows where danger might hide. And slowly, she realized something terrifying. She was beginning to depend on him. One evening, she summoned him to her private chamber. He bowed as always, standing tall and calm. She studied him in silence for a long moment, her sharp eyes tracing his scarred armor, his steady gaze. "Do you never rest?" she asked at last. "I rest when I can," he answered. "But danger does not rest, mistress. So I cannot." Her lips curved into a thin smile. "You think yourself my shield?" He nodded once. "I am," her heart tightened. No one had ever spoken to her so simply, without fear, without flattery. His words were not meant to please her. They were only the truth. That night after he left, she stood at the window of her chamber and stared out at the stars. For the first time in centuries, she felt something she did not know how to name. It was not control. It was not victory. It was something gentler, something she had long buried. The mistress had tested him with treasure. He had refused. She had tested him with power. He had refused. And yet he remained, guarding her with a loyalty that no trick could explain. She pressed a hand to her chest, her claws curling slightly. "What am I becoming?" she wondered. "What has this human done to me?" She had never needed anyone. She had never trusted anyone. But now when she imagined her throne without him standing at her side, she felt a hollow ache she did not want to admit. The mistress turned from the stars, her cloak wrapping around her like a shield. She whispered to herself, "Perhaps the final test will decide. If he truly cannot be broken, then I must know what he values most." And in her cold, sharp eyes there was no greed, no calculation. For the first time in her reign there was fear, not of losing power, but of losing him. The alien mistress stood before the great chamber of riches, her heart beating faster than she cared to admit. The room was vast, filled with mountains of gold, rivers of jewels, and treasures stolen from 1,000 worlds. The air shimmered with the glow of alien crystals, their light casting dancing colors across the black stone walls. This was more than wealth. This was her empire's lifeblood. And tonight it would be her final test. She had tried everything. Treasure, wine, power. None of it had bent the human. His loyalty remained firm, his will unshaken. But still a sharp edge of doubt cut at her. She had to know if he was truly unbreakable, or if his mask would finally crack. She stood at the center of the chamber, her jeweled cloak trailing behind her. Her human bodyguard entered silently as always, his armor scarred but his stance steady. His eyes flicked across the treasure, then quickly returned to her, sharp and alert. "You summoned me, mistress?" he asked. She nodded slowly, her lips curling into a thin smile. "Yes, tonight is different. Tonight you face the greatest test." She spread her arms wide, her voice echoing against the walls. "All of this is yours. Every coin, every jewel, every weapon forged in alien fire. Take it, rule it. I will not stop you." The human's gaze swept across the chamber once more, then returned to her. His face was calm, unreadable. "And if I refuse?" The mistress stepped closer, her eyes glowing. "Then take me instead," his brow furrowed. She smiled, though her heart pounded in her chest. "I offer myself, human. My throne, my empire, my very life. If you desire me, I am yours. If you desire this treasure, it is yours. Everything here is yours if you choose it." The silence was heavy. For the first time in centuries, the alien mistress felt exposed, uncertain, even vulnerable. She waited for him to move, to reach, to claim. But before he could answer, the doors of the chamber exploded inward. A dozen masked assassins stormed inside, blades flashing, eyes burning with fury. The mistress gasped, her cloak whipping around her as she stumbled back. The treasure spilled and clattered as the killers rushed forward. But the human did not hesitate. His blade was in his hand before the first assassin reached him. Steel rang, sparks flew, and blood stained the floor. He moved like a storm, his sword cutting through the attackers with brutal precision. Every strike was for one purpose, to shield the mistress. "Stay behind me," he barked, his voice sharp. She obeyed, her heart racing as she pressed back against a mound of jewels. She had offered him everything, treasure, power, even herself. And still, when danger came, he chose not to take, but to protect. The assassins came in waves. One lunged from the side, his blade aimed at her throat, but the human caught him mid-strike, his sword slicing clean through. Another leapt from above, but the human threw his shoulder forward, knocking the attacker into a pile of gold coins before finishing him with a single thrust. The chamber rang with the clash of steel, the cries of the dying, the crash of jewels tumbling. Yet through it all, the human stood unbroken, his body moving like a wall of iron before her. Finally, the last assassin fell, his mask cracked, his body sprawled across the shining treasure. The chamber fell silent, save for the heavy sound of the human's breathing. He lowered his sword, blood dripping from the blade, and turned to face her. His eyes were steady, his face calm despite the battle's chaos. "You are safe," he said simply. The mistress stared at him, her claws trembling at her side. She looked at the treasure piled high around them, at the power she had offered, at herself, her throne, her empire, her very life. And none of it had tempted him. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Why? Why do you protect me when I have given you every reason to betray me?" The human sheathed his blade and looked at her with eyes that carried no greed, no hunger, only resolve. "Because I swore to. Because it is right. Because duty is stronger than desire." The word struck deeper than any weapon. The mistress felt something break inside her, but it was not pain. It was something else, something she had not felt in so long she had almost forgotten its name. For the first time in her reign, she stepped closer to someone, not as a ruler, not as a conqueror, but as a woman. Her jeweled hand trembled as it reached for him, then stopped just short of touching. "You," she whispered. "You are more than I planned for." The human bowed his head slightly, silent as always, but his presence was steady, strong, unshaken. And as the glow of the treasure lit the chamber, the alien mistress realized that all her tests had been meaningless. She had sought to break him, but instead he had broken her, not with wealth, not with power, but with loyalty, and that was worth more than all the galaxies she ruled.